Richard Browning. Richard, I got to see this at TED, but for our viewers who have never seen this before, what are you wearing?
Essentially a jet engine powered flying suit.
And you flew. You are flying. This is the future we've been promised for decades.
Yeah, it's certainly good fun. It's been a kind of long journey, not that long a journey, but a journey of constantly iterating and adapting. And I'm really delighted where we got to. Even since I last saw you, it's got a lot further forward than I ever imagined. So and there's loads more to come as well. Absolutely loads.
Okay, so walk me through the constituent parts of this. There's
Yeah.
2 rocket and jet engines on each of your arms.
Yes. So yes, 2 on each arm, and they're slightly splayed out, and that creates a lot of the stability. And then we used to, when I last saw you, we used to have a pair of the same engines on the rear.
On the back.
And between those 6 engines, you ended up with really quite a nice spread of stability. So if you draw a straight line out of each one, it'd be really stable.
Yeah, we found that on Mythbusters when we raised a car from fire hoses.
Exactly.
It was
Yes.
ludicrously stable.
Yeah, and it actually wants to be.
that.
Yeah, it actually wants to be stable in that way. And then by making micro adjustments to essentially the vectors, the directions you're pointing them in, you can then adjust your height, and you can adjust, as I just did there, in terms of hovering in front of you. If you would try and get a machine to do that, it would be quite a challenge. Whereas actually, it becomes quite intuitive. I'd argue standing up or standing on one leg is probably harder from scratch to learn than what I just did there.
And to be clear, when you say adjusting your thrust vector with your arms, you are an incredible physical specimen. You're an extreme sportsman and you work out all the time. It takes a lot of arm strength to bring that in, doesn't it?
It's actually, it's kind of strange. So they're pushing directly up in the opposite direction from where you're pointing them, with up to about 90 pounds, right? So it's a bit like locking your arms out and sort of leaning on a chair or something, right? That's not too bad. If you hold them in the right way, it's okay. What actually gets quite hard is actually the muscle to lift it up. And whether that's on or off, it's the same weight. It's the weight.
Deadlifting.
So if you start to tire, then your ability to go down, unless you start playing with the throttles, which starts to get tricky, your ability to go down starts to degrade because you've got to lift them up to go down. So you don't want to be doing that. So.
Tell me, your development process must have looked very much like those early scenes in Iron Man. Did you fly through any windows?
We didn't do any windows. We didn't destroy any AC Cobras or Ferraris or anything.
Good.
But as per, in fact, the TED Talk and the little clips in that TED Talk, you can see that in the early stages we were like tethered to stuff and we were falling over and we were learning the balance. And there was a real moment where I remember thinking, right, maybe because there's no rule book for this, no manual, maybe I should sort of spread myself a bit like a sort of dog, so I'm leaning forward and I've got 4 table legs of support. And it just didn't work at all. And actually during an attempt, I actually straightened up and actually turned my arms out, and actually that really worked really well. I can't quite explain why, but that's exactly what the CGI guys in Iron Man show in one of the scenes. He sort of straightens up and owns it, right? And we actually sort of accidentally discovered a lot. I mean, it's credit to the CGI guys, right? They just must have thought about this an awful lot, and but it's not been an entirely dissimilar process.
And what is all of this blinking stuff that's on your chest here?
Firstly, I'd say it's a sort of live development thing at the moment. So it's not very pretty. Don't look too close. The next versions are much tidier. But essentially, you've got originally 6 little enclosures where you've got an ECU that controls each engine. That is connected to my control box. There's a control box. That's the Wi-Fi box. The control box here. That converts the signals from my triggers and my kill switch into what these guys want to hear. And they then control the engines. We've actually, as you might notice, I've got my earplugs in one, and this one's nothing in there because the rear engine is now one big engine which has its own ECU built in, so we don't need those anymore. Although these little guys here, they're how we interrogate the engines and the light sequences.
And find out how they're doing.
Exactly,
And you are wearing your fuel tank?
The 2 bladders either side. Again, they're development tanks. Really, they're just repurposed other tanks. I've got the custom ones, back in the UK. Which will give us even longer flight times. For something like this will still allow me to fly, in theory, for about 5 minutes.
5 minutes with just this?
Yeah.
And tell me about the boots. How are they not catching on fire?
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit bizarre, right? So they are synthetic. They're actually anti-rattlesnake-born, rattlesnake-proof boots from Texas, right? So they're nice and squidgy, so teeth can't go through them. But actually, they're really, really lightweight walking boots, and they just generally keep the heat off. I've flown it in trainers before. It just, after a while, you catch every now and then a little eddy of hot air and it becomes a bit unpleasant. But as you say, they're synthetic. And I mean, I've been flying with exactly these boots for 18 months and there's not a shadow of any damage. And yet here it's 700 degrees. 700 degrees centigrade there, and it drops catastrophically within a few feet.
I mean, you landed just a few feet from me, and it just felt like a hot breeze.
Yeah, a bit gritty, but
grit my teeth, sure.
It's another one of the myths that actually was around, that if you started with a blank piece of paper and tried to build or tried to design this, it would have been one of the reasons why you thought this could never be possible, and it was that the heat would be all too unmanageable, but it's not.
Okay, so where to? This, you said this is a development. This is in progress. Where to from here? What's your next plan?
I mean, there's about 7 or 8 different development streams that are all running in parallel and all somewhat unrelated, so they all run as fast as they can. So, I mean, we didn't talk about the helmet. This is a holographic heads-up display helmet, which takes all the data from the engines and from the fuel system, and then paints all that data onto my visor here.
So you're looking at an augmented reality display, just like Iron Man.
Yep.
Oh, that's so cool.
But, you know, Daiquiri, the guys make the helmet, and then there's lots of AR options out there. But this is just a pretty cool one, and they're working on future iterations which get even more clever. And it's not a bad use case, because I can't really go looking at dials or looking around. It's nice to have it here. I mean, there's a really big improvement coming with these guys here. So
these are off-the-shelf engines.
Yes, slightly modified. Yeah. We are working on a whole bunch of adaptations with the manufacturer to make them much more fit for what we're now using them for, because clearly they weren't designed for this.
Right.
But even the housings, I'm quite excited about that. We've fully CAD'd up a beautiful kind of organic-inspired housing, and that's being 3D printed now.
Your housings being 3D, your temperature-proof housings being 3D printed.
Yeah, so it's aluminium sintered, and it's just going to be a beautiful, organic, lovely one-piece kind of design. So I'm very excited about that. Yeah, there's that. I mean, we've been talking about some of the suit, right? This has got many holes all over the place because of the various stages of iterations. I think we can improve this a lot. We can still add the survivability and the protection, but make it kind of,
more badass.
Exactly, yes. And moving around some of the electronics, some of the batteries, I don't need to be carrying quite so many of these. I mean, it means I can start up half a dozen times, easily. But yeah, there's a whole bunch of other stuff. Also, I'll tease you with the biggest exciting thing going, and that's wing surfaces. So aerofoil, the transition, I will say, you're gonna love this, the transition, the transition from vertical takeoff to aerofoil flight.
Which uses a fraction of the energy as well.
So you start backing the engines off, you actually start to stabilize with the airflow, and then you can pull up and get to parachute height in a safe way.
Can
Yeah.
those wings deploy?
Later on, I know, exactly. You saw how fast, I mean, even in this short space, right?
Yeah, no,
I've got up to 45, 50 miles an hour, over grass, which is a bit more forgiving if you have a problem. And I can feel the airflow. My body starts to tip back, even just with the airflow over the non-aerofoil human being. So if we start adding a little bit of lift, it's just going to be awesome.
Like I said, I was Richard's ground support at TED, and the increase in your comfort with the control and flight is radical. You've been flying a lot.
Yeah, it's the best way of learning. I was saying to the guys back there that every time I do even a fly for TV or whatever, I'm always flying with stuff that's different. So every single time I'm changing stuff, because it becomes the best opportunity to go and test and learn and adapt.
So how long until I can have a ride?
I would say you could have a go almost immediately with the arm engines and jump around like you're on the moon with that. That's quite a comfortable thing. Lighting up the rear one, that starts to become a bit more committing. Let's put it that way. But